All right, everybody. I think it is time. I'm so glad so many people have joined us for this, and I'm so appreciative that Nikki has offered this to the Anshe Chesed and larger community. I'm going to mute everyone during this presentation. As we go along, if you have questions, we invite you to add them to the chat. Nikki's husband has agreed to serve as train conductor, is keeping everything going, and she will track it. But I'm going to mute everybody just so that the process can go smoothly. And thank you, Nikki, and it's all you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerome.
Hold on, I'm gonna have to mute you for a second, and then I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Just to give you a bit of background, I like to make challah in a very similar kind of setting through the Heschel School. I probably have never bought challah since. It was many years ago. And once you get the bug, it's hard to stop making it. So I will give you tips along the way. And if you have questions, please feel free to chat them. And I will answer to the best of my ability. So we are going to begin with warm water. It should be no hotter than 120 degrees Fahrenheit. This is about 110. So we're going to put 1 cup of warm water in a bowl. And to that, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of sugar, any sugar, granulated sugar. And that is going to help activate our yeast. Now I'm using active dry yeast. There are many different kinds of yeast. There's instant, there's fresh. You can use instant or active. I find the fresh is not as good for challah. This is better, and it's 1 sachet. You will see at the end of this, it makes 1 very large challah or 2 nice sized challahs for Friday night. So I'm going to sprinkle in my yeast, and then we give it about 5 minutes to activate. The main reason we do this is to ensure that it's fresh, that it hasn't gone bad. Sometimes you get a dud yeast, and then you'd rather know now than after you've mixed in all your ingredients and then realize it's not rising. So what I will show you on the camera once it starts to prove what you're looking for. So it usually happens pretty quickly, but it's actually fun. It's kind of like a chemical reaction. You see it start bubbling. It gets kind of a mushroom on top. And then you know your yeast is good and you're good to go. I also, while we're waiting for that, I want to let you know just a little bit about flour. So you can see here I have our all-purpose flour, and I also have bread flour here. With the current climate, it's very hard to find certain products. So I would say in all situations, all-purpose is king. It works for everything. And so if that's what you have, that's great. The main difference between bread flour and all-purpose flour is protein. Bread flour has a high protein content, which helps kind of once you add the water to that, it makes the glutens stretchier, and that creates that bready quality that we like. All-purpose has a slightly lower protein content, and then things like cake flour, pastry flour have the lowest, and so that's how you get very light, fluffy cake, but not so good for bread. So all-purpose or bread, once it's all available again, it's really a preference. I actually really like bread flour for challah. Some people prefer all-purpose, so you can play around and see what you like. In addition, I found spelt flour to work very well for people who want a lower gluten index, it still makes a good bread. And then you can also experiment with mixing in whole wheat flour. You can do all whole wheat, you can do a mix of whole wheat and bread. But that's sort of like a cup to cup ratio. All of those that I mentioned work well. So I'm watching my yeast and it looks like it's activating. I might just bring it a little bit closer so you can see that it forms kind of like a mushroom on top, and it's swirling around now. But I think my yeast is good. So to that, we are going to add 3.5 teaspoons of sugar. You can just like sprinkle in. And we're gonna add 1/8 of a cup of honey. Just a tip for your honey, I like to put a little bit of oil in the cup that I'm using, tip that out, then put in my honey. It's something the person who taught me, Katja Goldman, told us to do, and then the honey just slides right out. So 1/8 of a cup of honey goes in there. To that, I'm gonna add a cup of flour. So about a cup. I'm going to give that a mix, and then I'm going to add my eggs. Now, I have this is a bread whisk. You can see that. This is a nice tool if you really get into challah making. It's like a dough hook. It really incorporates the ingredients nicely, but a wooden spoon also works great, and eventually we're going to get in there with our hands, so this is not necessary. It's just, you know, if you really get into it, it's worth getting. So I'm going to mix in my flour, honey, and sugar. And the reason I do that before I add the eggs is just because the water's warm, and I like to add that before. Now I'm going to add my eggs. Now apparently we have a question. So there's 2 eggs here. I just, before I get to the question, best to crack them into a separate bowl before they go in, just in case it's a bad egg. That way you don't destroy everything you've already done. And these are good eggs, so I'm adding them to my mix. And then I'm going to give that a stir too. So the question is, can you use sourdough starter instead of yeast? And the answer, actually, I just, over this coronavirus period, have grown my own sourdough starter. So I'm very new to sourdough, and I've not yet made a sourdough challah. So I'm going to have to put a pin on that in that one. I am planning to, but I can't tell you yet how to substitute yeast for a starter, because I just haven't done it yet. But the answer is yes. I know people who make sourdough challahs, and I just don't know. I can't tell you quantities until I've done it. So, okay, so give that a mix. Now we're going to add 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. I add canola. A word about oils. I think a neutral oil is best. I have used olive oil. It definitely makes a darker challah. It's got more robust flavor because it's a flavored oil, so you can absolutely use it. But to get that sort of traditional sweet, doughy challah, canola oil is the one I use. So I'm going to add that. Okay, another question. Can you substitute sugar or like with honey or molasses? The answer is yes. So the recipe I've provided you is your base. And you can absolutely, you can substitute maple syrup for honey. You can try brown sugar. You could try molasses. I would do molasses instead of honey. And it's really, at that point, it's experimentation. So I would say that you can't substitute the amount of yeast to water, to you know, sweetness, to eggs. You definitely want to have those ingredients, but then you can play. So sometimes I like to add vanilla to my dough, especially if I'm going to fill it with something sweet. And you know, you can really be creative. Okay, so I'm combining my oil, giving that a stir, and now we're going to start adding our flour in. And what I want to tell you about flour is, I find with this amount of, with this portion, you always need 3 cups of flour as your basis. But then depending on the humidity in the air, then it's kind of, you just have to go based on feel. So in the height of summer, I can use 5 cups of flour. And when it's very cold, I can use 3.5. And so it's not really a set amount of flour. You're really going for a feel. And obviously you've never made challah, so that stresses people out when you say, how do I know how it's supposed to feel? So I'm gonna show you, and what you're going for is, you'd rather have too little flour to begin with so that it isn't dry, and then build up as you go along. So I'm gonna very confidently, I had 3 cups of flour in here. We already added 1, so there's 2 cups of flour in here. So I'm gonna add this flour in, and I'm gonna give it a stir. And then there's gonna be one more ingredient we add in before that, which is salt, which I have forgotten salt. And it is an extremely important ingredient for challah. It just tastes it always feels like something's missing if there's no salt in that. So add your salt, and if you can find flavored salts, that can be a very fun thing to experiment with too. I have a good truffle salt that you can substitute for regular salt, and then you will have truffle flavored challah. So it's 1.5 teaspoons of salt. This is just regular fine salt. One thing though, kosher salt is, you know, heavier granules, and so it's not a 1.5 to 1.5 ratio, because it's basically less salt in each grain to the fine. So fine salt is the way to go, and it's 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, so now we're gonna give that a mix, and then we're gonna slowly start to add more flour. So I'm gonna take 1/2 cup of flour. I'm going to sprinkle 1/2 of that on. And at this point, I'm still using my dough whisk, but I'm very soon going to put that aside and get in there with my hands. So I'm going to try to scoop up all the dry flour into the dough. And I am going to clean off my dough whisk, and this is the fun part. Now, a lot of people use a KitchenAid, or they use a bread machine. Totally fine. I happen to really love doing this by hand. It's very cathartic, and also over the years, I really have gotten a sense of how I want it to feel, which when you do it in a mixer or in the bread machine, you know it's all done for you. Yeah, I can't give this up. I really enjoy the physicality of making it by hand. So I picked up all my dough. I'm going to put my bowl aside, and I'm going to sprinkle some flour on my board, and now I'm going to start kneading. And as you knead, you it will feel sticky because we have only added about 3 1/4 cups of flour. And you're going for the moment where it stops sticking to your hands and the counter, and it really is holding together, but it's still very supple and stretchy. Now, what about kneading? You want to sort of push it around, but don't break it up. So you don't want to like stretch and pull it, because what you're doing in kneading is you're helping develop the glutens. So my dough is feeling really sticky. I'm going to add some more flour. And with kneading, I would say people generally don't knead long enough. The kneading is going to really give you your rise. So the longer you knead, the more air and rise you're going to get from your dough. I find 10 minutes is usually the right amount of time. So I probably won't do this in front of you for the entire time. I'll let you guys do it while I keep talking. But I am going to do it until I feel like it's gotten to a point where it's a nice consistency that I can show you. So again, if you watch the way I do it, I kind of turn it around, I give it a push, I pull, I pick it up. So it's sort of like, if anyone's ever worked with pottery, it's very similar to that. Now this is still feeling sticky, so I'm going to add more flour. And don't hesitate, if it's sticky, you definitely want to add flour. It shouldn't be sticking to your hands. And you're going for the moment when it's no longer sticking, but it still feels really soft. Any questions? Okay, feel free to chat any questions you might have. Now, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about what makes challah challah. So people think that the braided bread, I mean, it is called challah, that is actually challah. But interestingly, challah is in fact the piece that you separate from the dough before you braid it, that you burn. That piece of dough is called challah. And that is actually what makes challah challah. Apparently, in biblical times, it was shaped like a pita. It wasn't a braided bread. And what made it challah was the fact that you had separated this piece of dough. It dates back to the part of bread, I think Moses was instructed to leave an offering to the priests, and that is what it symbolizes. Yes. Do you flour the board when kneading? So the question is, do you flour the board when kneading? And I do. So I'm going to do it right now because my dough is feeling sticky. I'm going to put some on and then just let the dough as I knead it soak up that flour. So after you separate the piece of dough, you are required to burn it, which you can do wrapped in foil over a pilot light, or just throw it in the oven. You don't want to actually burn it while you're baking the challah, but that piece of dough is in fact what makes your challah your challah. There are, not to get too technical, but for this amount of dough, you would not need to make a separation. It's actually a quantity thing. You'd have to make 3 times this to require you to separate and say the prayer for the challah. I'm going to tell you guys something else. It'll come to me. So this is still feeling very sticky. So I'm going to add a little more flour. So I think I'm still under 4 cups, but I'm probably, you know, getting close to that. And it's starting to feel less sticky. Okay. A little more. Okay, so you keep doing this until it's no longer sticking to your board and it's no longer sticking to your hands, which this one is actually getting pretty close.
How long does it usually take?
Question is, how long does it usually take? I find that I'm kneading for at least 10 minutes for it to get to that that right feeling. There's actually a test you can do yourself, which is once you feel like you've gotten it to the point where it's no longer sticky, still feels light, you can break off a little piece of it. And if you can stretch that piece really thin until the point where it's transparent and it doesn't tear, you've kneaded it enough. And that's called the window pane test. So I don't know if I'm gonna get there with that, but let's see. So actually I want to move on to be able to show you guys some braiding. I might hand this over to my daughter to finish, but let's see. So I'll do one more little addition of flour. And then I have another dough that's been rising that I will pull out. Now, when you've gotten it to the desired feeling, what you're going to do is you're going to take your bowl that you made it in and put some oil inside the bowl, just a little bit, line it in oil. And we're going to cover that for 2 hours to let it double in size, at least 2 hours. In warm water, in warmer weather, it could be an hour and a half, but generally it's about 2 hours for it to do its first rise. Now, if you start doing it on Thursday night and you realize, it's too late, I'm not going to be able to bake it tonight, you still should let it do its first rise. And then you can put it inside of a Ziploc with some oil in it and squeeze out the air. You can put that in the fridge until the next day. And the only thing you need to do is let it come back to room temperature, which will take probably another 2 hours until you braid it and then bake it. Okay, so.
Question.
Just name the quantities.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you over knead it? Like cookies or something? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I have never over kneaded challah. I think you can overproof it. I think because of the egg and oil content of this bread, it's very forgiving. It's a very liquidy bread, you know, so it's very forgiving. And I think it's hard to over knead. I think you'll get tired before you get to a point of over kneading it. So I have a question about flour. So you'll see in the recipe that I posted, I wrote 3 to 4 cups of flour. So the reason it's an approximation is just because it's a living thing and it very much responds to the temperature under which you're making it. So if you're in a really humid kitchen, you're going to find that you need a lot more flour than 3 cups. But if it's very cold and dry, you may really only need a 3 1/4 cups. And that's why I can't write on there an exact amount, and also why I prefer to do this by hand, because if you throw 4 cups of flour in a bread machine, it may be too much for the temperature under which you're baking it.
The first one, then 2 and 3.
So what I do is I add the first cup of flour into the water and yeast mixture. Then I mix that. Then I add the rest of my ingredients other than the salt. And I add the second cup, I mix it. I add a third cup, I mix it. And I'm very confident to add 3 cups without feeling it, because I know it's going to need minimum of 3 cups of flour. And at that point, once I start kneading is when I start figuring out how much flour it's going to take. And I think I've probably used close to 4 today. It's stopped sticking to my hands. It's not sticking to the board, and it's actually feeling really good. So I don't know if I'm ready for the window pane test, but we'll do it and we'll see. Actually. So just so you can see, I'm stretching that dough, and I'll come a bit closer, and you can see that it's starting to get transparent and not tearing. So that I would say that is ready to rise. So I'm going to take my canola oil, or whatever neutral oil you're using, and add a bit to the bowl. Give it a rub it around, and then I'm going to put my dough into, I like to sort of stretch it into a ball, rub it in the oil, and that is ready to do its first rise. So we're going to cover that, and I'm going to bring out the dough that has already risen. So this is what it will look like in a couple of hours. And this is the super fun part. I'm going to take the dough and we're going to punch it down. Release the air. So you can see all the air that comes out of it. And then I'm going to just wipe off all the dough that's stuck to the bowl and pull it out. Okay, so out of this recipe, we're going to make 2 challah. Can you leave a pastry cover? It's in that drawer. And I'm going to show you 2 different braids. We're going to do a 3 braid, and I'm going to do a 6 braid. Now, after the rise, yeah, so that, obviously I just took my dough out, it's been sitting there, it rose for 2 hours, and it's ready. The dough that you are creating now will need to sit for 2 hours. But because we're not going to sit here for 2 hours, I'm going to demonstrate how to braid this dough that's already risen. And I should tell you that YouTube is a wonderful thing, and there are so many braids on YouTube that you can learn. I'm just going to demonstrate 2 of them. Feel free to ask questions as I go, and I can actually have Daron post some references for you in terms of braiding afterwards. So while I'm working on the one, I'm just going to give this a cover.
Is it exactly 2 hours, or is it exact measurement?
So there's a question of, is it exactly 2 hours for the first rise? And I would say no, you should give it at least 2 hours. You really want it to, you saw how much bigger it expanded. You want to give that first rise time to develop. I think you cannot overproof it for its first rise. If let's say you let it rise for 3 hours and you're just not quite ready to bake it at that point, just punch it down, cover it up. If you know it's going to be like 8 hours before you can bake it, then put it in the fridge. Make sure it's completely covered. But if it's going to be another hour and a half, it's fine to leave it to sit and wait. Just punch it down and let it rise a little longer. However, once you've braided it and it's waiting to proof for a second rise, then you can overproof it. So you should really only braid it when you know that you have time to stick it in the oven after an hour. Okay, so first I'm going to do the 3 braid. So I'm going to divide it into 3 equal pieces. I'm going to guesstimate. If you really want to be exact, you can use a kitchen scale to measure the weight, but I'm going to eyeball. And then you're going to take your pieces and kind of push and roll. And you're going to make 3 ropes. Now you can either make 3 straight ropes or you can taper them at the ends. And that's just a style thing. If you want your challah to be tapered at the ends, then taper your ropes too, which I'm going to do. I'm going to taper my ends. So here's 1 rope. Then I'm going to do my next rope. So in terms of the rolling, sometimes you'll find that your dough is not giving and it might just need to rest a little bit. So you can give it 5 minutes to rest and then try to roll it again. You'll see actually, even with this one, how much it's going to relax between rolling that and then rolling the others. And then I'll roll my 3rd one. So you see that, and I don't know if you can tell on the video, but it's actually springing back. And put them side by side. They're contracting. And that's just the glutens are kind of pulling in. Question, how do you know if it's overcooked? Okay, so again, for the first rise, don't worry about overproofing. If it's been too long, just punch it down, put it in a bowl, cover it, it's going to be fine. Once you braid it and you've got it sitting out to rise, it's no longer covered and it is in its shape and it's rising. So once it's sat there for, I think an unfilled challah, and when I say filled, I actually sometimes fill my dough with flavorings, chocolate chips, cinnamon. If you visit my Instagram, you can see. And those challahs need to proof for at least an hour. But a plain challah that has no filling needs about 30 to 40 minutes to proof before it goes in the oven. And when you overproof it, what happens is it rises, it rises, it rises. And if it's been too long, it actually starts to deflate. And so that deflating is the challah overproofing. So it'll still taste delicious. You can still bake it at that point, but it's just not going to have the same rise. Okay, so I'm going to roll this out again. How long wide? So how long or wide the rope should be is really, again, a preference thing. These are about 12 inches. You'll see as I braid them, they stretch out a little bit too. What I'm going for right now is that the 3 ropes are pretty even. And then as you pull them, it actually will stretch out too. But it's a question of how sort of thick and squat you want the challah as opposed to thin and long. So it's really a preference thing. Okay, so I think I'm going to turn my ropes that way. It'll probably be easier to see on the camera. Okay. So I'm just going to ask you, can everyone see this? Do you need me to bring the camera closer? You can see? Okay. All right, so I like to start from the middle with a 3 braid. And I don't know, and for anyone who's braided somebody's hair, it's exactly the same, except you don't start in the middle usually then. But you go over with the one side and then over into the middle. Here, I'm gonna pick up the board so you can see. And then back into the middle. So you're always bringing the outer piece into the center. Wait, stop there. Okay. And then I'm going to leave the ends undone right now. And I'm going to go to the other side. And now, because I'm going from the other direction, I'm going under instead of over. But always into the center. And when I get to the end, I'm going to take those pieces and I'm going to squish them together and make a point. And then I'm going to turn it around. And same on this side. As I come to the end, I'm stretching and squeezing and making a point. And that is a 3 braid challah. Okay, so I'm going to put that on. This is going to go on a baking pan on a piece of parchment paper. Like that. And I'm going to work on my 6th braid. So this one I will demonstrate, but it takes some practice. So I will show you and I'll go slowly, but I would suggest finding it on YouTube and watching it again and again and again. It just takes time. Once you get it, it's like you won't forget it, but it does take time to do. Okay, so I am rolling out, I've separated 6 pieces. Excuse me one moment. No. We're going to roll out, again, just like with the 3 braid, we're going to roll out 6 ropes of dough. And because I'm using double the amount of ropes, they're going to be thinner. Same amount of challah, double the amount of ropes. So the pieces themselves are going to be thinner. Not going to worry about tapering them. And you'll see they'll contract a little bit after the first roll. You can also see, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a bubble in this rope, and that's just the air. And I'm going to pierce that before it bakes, because it will puff up and explode. So I'm just like going to put a knife in it. You have another question?
Yeah, so do you bake on the pan or do you ever use a baking stone?
So for challah, I don't use a baking stone. I always use a baking sheet. The only thing that I do, and it just depends on the shapes I'm making. Sometimes I'll use a cake tin if I filled it with chocolate, or I've used molds, loaf pans. but I don't think challah needs a baking stone. Because you're not looking for that, at least I'm not. So this is a preference thing also. I really like soft, squishy, sweet challah. Some people like crunchy challah, and then, you know, you could experiment with a stone because that's going to give you a more crunchy crust. Just not what I'm looking for in challah. So I don't use that. Okay, so I've got my 6 ropes. I'm going to turn them around so that you can see. And you see the dough is very forgiving. It's soft, but it's not sticky. It's very light. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch the top of the 6 strands together. Okay, so I'm going to pull them and pinch. Okay, and sort of make a triangle. Yeah, will you bring the camera a little bit? Okay, stop right there. Okay. So now you see we have 6. Now I like to think of this of having 4 in the center and 2 on the outside. So I'm going to take one of my outside strands and I'm going to take it all the way to the other side. And I'm going to take the other outside strand, the opposite one, and I'm going to take it to the other side. So now we've got 4 in the middle. Now the piece that's behind, which is this one, I'm going to bring forward into the center of the 4. Now I have 1 over here, but I've got 5. So I take the outermost rope that's next to this one, and I pull it over. So now again, I have my 2 on the outside and my 4 in the middle. So now I want to bring 1 in the center. So the one I want to bring in the center is not the one that's on top, but the one that's in behind. So I'm going to bring it over the center and in between these 4. But now I'm missing this guy. So I go to the strand that's on the opposite side and I pull it over. So again, I have my 2 pieces on either side. Just go back a little bit. Okay, so now I've got my 4 in the middle. Now I need to bring 1 into the center. Again, I don't want this one because it's in front. I want the one that's in behind. So I pull it forward into the middle, but now I'm missing this guy. So I bring the piece that's opposite and I pull it over. And you just keep repeating that. So again, I need 1 in the middle. This one's behind. I pull it in the center. Now I need this guy up here. I'm going to take the opposite one and I'm going to pull it over. 1 in the middle. Now I need this guy. I'm pulling the opposite one over there. Again, I've got 4 in the middle. Bring this one into the center. Now I need this one. I'm going to bring it over. So is this going too quickly? How are you guys feeling about this? Not too, it's good? Okay, great. So again, I'm going to bring center and then the opposite. And then I'm going to show you what happens with the ends. So these ones, as it gets close to the end, it gets a little tricky because you don't have the same pull. So I keep stretching.
Wait, will you put the camera back where it was so we can see that?
Yeah, so we bring it back. So go right above. So we can come here, a bit closer. Okay, good. All right, so now you'll see how they're quite stumpy, these little pieces, but I'm still following the same idea of I need my 2 up here and my 4 in the center, and I'm trying to keep track of where the middle is. Okay, and then when you get to the end, then you're gonna just kind of take it all and you're gonna squish it and you're gonna tuck it underneath, just like that. So just to turn it around, I'm tucking it underneath, and the braid is like that. And then I'm going to go where I started, where I pinch those pieces, and I'm also going to just tuck them so that I have a nice braid. Okay, now I'm going to put this challah next to the other one I made. And now we're going to do an egg wash. So egg wash is going to give that bread that glossy, you can put it down now and I will tell you if you need it. It's going to give it that glossy challah look. I have a tablespoon of water in here, and I'm going to crack an egg into it. Now, some people like to add honey to this. We did a test last week, and we figured out that when there's honey, it's a little less shiny, which is surprising. I generally add honey on Rosh Hashanah for the sweetness, but mostly I just do egg and water. Okay, so we're going to baste the two challahs, and then they're going to go into the oven. Now again, temperature, let's talk about that. So if you really like a crusty challah, dark brown, you want to go on a higher heat. If you like it soft and chewy, go on a lower heat. So I like to bake my challah at 325 for about 40 minutes for a large one. These are going to need more like 30 minutes. What I do is I set the timer for 15 minutes and I rotate the tray, and I do another 15 minutes. I have invested in a thermometer just because I like it very underdone, but you don't want to serve raw challah. So I have the thermometer to put into the thickest part, and it should read at an internal temperature of 190 Fahrenheit. And that way you can get that soft, almost raw, but still baked challah. If you find, some ovens run really hot, if you find that it's browning too quickly, you can also tempt it with a piece of aluminum foil and just slow down the browning. But again, it's all preference and experimenting. Any questions? You guys can unmute or text or chat a question if you have any. Otherwise,
I had a question.
yes.
Is there a second rise in here, and is that before or after you put on the egg?
Thank you, Alana. Yes. So once it's at this point, and if it's a plain challah, not filled with anything, you want to leave it to sit before it goes in the oven for at least 30 minutes. And you will know that it's ready to go in when you poke it and the indentation remains. If the indentation slowly comes back out, it hasn't proofed long enough. So sometimes that will be 30 minutes and sometimes it'll be 45 minutes. But you will see, and it's fine, just stick your finger in, and if that little indentation stays there, it's proofed enough, it can go in the oven. And it shouldn't need more than an hour.
But it's okay, you egged it first.
I did egg it first, yeah. And that's fine. Some people actually don't egg it at all at first. They put it in, they do most of the bake, and then they egg it. And you can do that too. That will make a slightly crunchier crust as well. But again, because I like it soft, I egg it before.
Do you always egg it and then proof it, or do you usually proof it and then egg it?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, you could leave it to proof and then egg it just before it goes in. For the purpose of this lesson, I did it straight away. But yeah, you could definitely let it do its proof, give it a poke. If it's ready, then egg it and put it in.
And can you just repeat what the internal temperature is that you want to get to?
Yeah, so this is my thermometer. And so I just stick it into the center of the thickest part, and I'm looking for an internal temperature of 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is 87 degrees Celsius for anyone who
Is it a particular type
natural.
of thermometer or just a regular?
I mean, this is a digital thermometer. You could use a meat thermometer, but these are easier. So if you want to invest, I highly recommend. Any other questions?
How do you get the seeds to stick?
Oh, seeds, right. So again, my family's preference is just like this. But if you really love seeds, you seed it after you baste it. And then the seeds are all going to adhere to the sticky egg wash challah. And then you can get creative. You know, you can do like different seeds, different colors, you know, sunflower, poppy, sesame. So you can do fun things with seeds. But yeah, I mean, check out Challah Tales on Instagram. You can get ideas for different shapes and flavors, and you can message me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer. All my friends know I'm slightly Challah obsessed, so happy to answer any questions anytime. Yes, another question.
Top rack.
Oh, top rack or bottom rack? Center rack. You want the challah in the center of the oven, unless, again, your oven runs hot. I find that I actually put it in the, you know, my oven here and my oven in the city are different. So here I definitely need to drop the rack, and it goes in the bottom third of the oven. Otherwise it just browns too quickly. So again, you can experiment, but center to lower rather than higher.
And what color do you want it to be?
What color? Will you bring up the one that I gave last week? So again, that's preference. If you like a really crunchy crust, it's going to go for more of a dark brown. If you like more chewy, it's kind of more of a golden color. My daughter's bringing me one that was baked last week, so we can show you in the back. But so that's sort of the color that we're always going for. And again, that's why I bought the thermometer, because, you know, you don't want raw color, but we do like it soft and chewy.
Who baked that one?
Oh, and this was made by my daughter. So, any other questions? Any other? You can unmute if you prefer to ask.
When do you usually do it? Thursday, Friday? How long? Say Friday.
Okay, so there's a question, when do I make it? So I like to actually make it on Thursday nights. It does take a good, you know, 3 to 4 hours out of your day to make challah. And I don't like it to feel rushed. So I usually like to come home on Thursday, prepare the dough, then, you know, let it do its rise, have dinner, and it sort of goes seamlessly into the evening. Sometimes it just gets too late and I throw it in the fridge, just ready to bake for the next day, which is fine too. It can actually sit in the fridge for a while. One word about that, if for some reason you would prepare your dough on Thursday night and then for whatever reason, you just don't get to bake it on Friday and it's sitting in the fridge, do not throw the dough out. It will sit there for a few days. It will become more and more like sourdough the more it sits. But it'll still be delicious. So you can wait. The main thing to do is when you do take it out of the fridge ready to bake, just bring it to room temperature, which will take another couple of hours. And then you start from where we did tonight. You braid it, you let it proof, and then you bake. And it should go into a preheated oven. So your oven should reach temperature before it goes in. And with that, if anyone has any questions, raise your hand now. Otherwise, I will send you off on your way to bake delicious challah.
That was amazing.
That was great.
Yay, Nikki.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Nikki.
Enjoy your challah. Send it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Nikki.
Bye.
Thank you, Anshe Chesed. This was great.
Sheikha said.
Thank you.
Thanks.